It's always good to have you in Columbia at Woodlawn. Thankful that you and the bride, Sister Heather,
Always a joy.
well, the privilege has been ours, and I'm so thankful for our relationship. You guys have been in our lives at a pivotal moment, and so thankful for your covering, your voice, and not only on our lives, but at Woodlawn. And so I'm so thankful for when we get to snag you to come to Columbia. And you don't just come through to Columbia. I mean, you don't just drive through it. You got to be coming
On purpose.
That's right. We've done some eating this weekend.
Boy, we have. I just have to say thank you. Some of the food
You're going to go back to Wisconsin maybe a couple pounds heavier than you got here.
Your Sunday dinner is Thanksgiving in my world. And unreal.
And you got your fried catfish? You got
I
that
did.
fix?
I got the fix. I'm a happy camper. And I do need to get back on the wagon when I get home. 'Cause we're probably not exaggerating that we put a few pounds on here.
Well, that's one thing that we have to offer. We don't have a lot in Mississippi, but good food and good company are at the top of the list.
We enjoyed it. Thank you for your hospitality.
Thank you for joining us today on Woodlawn Talks, wherever you are, in your car, at home. Thank you so much for being a listener. If you're a first time, we welcome you to Woodlawn Talks. It is our joy to be able to share with you every single week just about what God is doing here, how we unpack the Word from Sunday, how do we live that, life application. And really, we want you to make this your best day yet. Pastor Soto, I love the message on Sunday, the one principle. You preached in the middle of our series, Live Your Legacy, and preached to families. And that is so crucial when you talk about legacy, because that's the people that are in our homes, under our roof. That's who we have the most influence with. That's who we want to live the legacy in front of.
Yes.
Tell us about the one principle. I know you base that off of Deuteronomy 6, but just relive that.
Yes. The one principle is essentially the Shema of the Jewish faith, that God is one, and we're to love the Lord with all of our heart, soul, and strength. And the one principle is simply that parenting is about one thing. It's about God, and we are called to remember always His oneness and to live a life of singularity. Our life is supposed to be God-centric. We're not supposed to be spritzing our weekends with worship. He is the main event. He is our life. And that was the call to the Jewish faith from the very beginning, to the Hebrews. And I think there's so much in there for Christians in this new covenant age.
That's good. You made a statement in your message that you're seeing apostolic churches that are more healthy than our apostolic homes.
That's right. I feel like there's a gap and it's growing. Our churches are becoming stronger, more sophisticated. We believe in teams, and so we have stables of under-shepherds leading congregations, and I think we're really thriving on the church level, but homes are falling behind. And it seems like parents are using church as a plug-and-play situation for their children. And they think if they just bring their kids to this great church, that this healthy home thing's going to happen automatically. And parents are becoming frustrated because church is amazing, but the home front is substandard. And so my goal was to help them to understand that healthy family culture doesn't just happen. And we can't count on pastor and youth pastor and the church altar to substitute the family altar and those critical conversations in the home.
Yeah. Well, why do you think parents are failing in their roles at home?
I think first and foremost, there is a stronghold. I think the enemy's attacking there. specifically. There's a stronghold. I think the enemy wants to homestead lies in parents' minds and tell them they don't have the moral authority to lead in the home. And because they've mismanaged moments on the home front, that the kids will never take them seriously. We still have, moms and dads who are convinced that they can't understand the Bible themselves. How could they teach it?
Yeah.
They still haven't figured out prayer. Their God connection isn't like it needs to be. And so the enemy, the accuser of their brethren, uses all that against them to say, you just don't have a right to speak into their lives. So they're paralyzed. They see it. I think they see the need, but they just don't feel adequate. And if they would just flip the script on that and look at their kids and say, hey, guys, it's time for us to grow together.
Yeah. That's so good. There's a lot of pastors, ministry leaders that listen to this podcast. You're a pastor yourself. What can we do as ministry leaders to start better equipping the leaders of the home to fulfill their role, to do what you talked about, in the message on Sunday? What does that look like? What can we do to equip? Or let me say this: what are you doing at ATC to equip your moms and dads to lead their homes well?
Well, we certainly incorporate parenting in our small groups, and we're always providing resources and great responses for parents in the small group platform. I think it needs to cover the pulpit as well, and so in preaching, I cover family topics. We also have a young family pastor in our church, basically a family pastor, and that's one of his jobs as well, to develop family culture, grow family culture. And then, of course, strengthening heads of households. You and I have talked at times about strengthening men.
Yes.
And creating a healthy culture for men. And I think that goes a long way, too, when men understand their role and responsibility. But we can't forget those single parents who don't have that opportunity.
That's right. And that number seems to be growing, as we reach our communities.
Right.
It's amazing how many single moms and single dads we have at Woodlawn.
Yes.
We've got to equip them tools, encouragement, strength,
right,
to make them feel like they can lead their homes well. They can live a legacy. They do have what it takes. I think that's huge. I'm not sure our parents, our heads of house, feel like they have what it takes.
You're absolutely right. Fear's threaded into this. And so as pastors and leaders in our fellowship, I think we need to let them know they have what it takes, that we walk by faith after all, and the coat always feels too big. Start the journey. Let's get started. And if you have to start with a disclaimer, kids, maybe we should have had this conversation 5 years ago, but we're going to start today. And having a creative conversation with the kids about what our new traditions are going to look like and what this system of worship and celebration is going to look like in the home. Just get it started. These kids are ready to say yes to a God-centric life.
That's so good. You define the difference between talking and teaching, and illustrated it when your kids were young. I love the stories that you gave, Blake and Braylon and Bryson. What did teaching and talking look like the older your kids?
It definitely changed from, that living room situation where, we are having fun and making sure that we don't go too long, to having a little bit different system. I broke it down when Blake and Braylon were in high school. I would teach a Bible study to my kids at McDonald's and anyone else they wanted to bring. And so they were both leading P7s, leading in a P7. So they would bring kids from their P7 to McDonald's, and I would teach. And so I'm teaching my kids along with their friends who they're discipling. And it looked a little bit different then. I started having one-on-ones where I would talk with Blake and Braylon and Bryson at different times because their lives were very unique at that time. You know, Blake's in college, Braylon's in high school, and Bryson's in junior high school. Unique conversations, unique crossroads. So I wanted to make sure I didn't underdeliver there. We still got together as a family. I think I remember the last series I taught with all of our family together before Braylon went to college and Blake got married was Living Your Purpose. And I think I taught 11 lessons on living your purpose.
In the home.
In the home.
That's so good. I love it. You mentioned to me even this weekend about you have breakfast with your boys.
Yes.
Expound on that, because I know that's so much that you teach them, you let them catch from you.
Right.
What just give us a real life example of Pastor Soto with Blake at breakfast or with Bryson at breakfast.
Well, I remember, and yes, we have this tradition of splitting a Mexican omelet and the pancakes, and we split a breakfast and we talk shop. Well, just before Blake moved away to be married, we had a very key conversation, and we were talking about you're going to a new church, and here's a couple things you might want to think about. Never say at ATC they do this. And it's going to be a different culture. Embrace the culture. Serve that church. And gave him some perspective on, servant leadership and ministry. And with Mr. Bryson, we had a conversation about a relationship that he's very excited about. We're all excited about. And so I'm catching up on that and getting a sense of, where is this relationship? And then talking about maybe some opportunities for him as he's preparing for a new season and chapter in his life. And, how spiritually we might want to prepare for things.
I think the word is intentionality.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're just being intentional with your kids. And, Bryson, obviously new relationship, but I think it's more than what I love about your approach, and you mentioned it in your sermon, is it's talking. Mm-hmm. It's not lecture style. It's not, you listen to Dad, I've got all the answers.
Mm-hmm.
Expound on that a little bit more for our audience today.
I really feel like the quality of the conversation is determined by the quality of the question. And good discussions, good conversations come about by the quality of the question. And you don't ask good questions if you're not interested. But if you're really interested, you start to get very nuanced in your questions that are provoking. And so I want my kids to talk, so I'm going to ask them depth finder questions. And I don't want to say too much because there are, some private conversations here recently. But I just feel like if you're really into your kids and where they're at in their lives, that can generate some amazing questions. And there's a lot of mileage that you can get out of those conversations.
I think we would both be shocked to find out the homes, the parent-child relationship that really don't have that talking element.
Right. That is so true. I think in a lot of homes, there's the official communication. Did you take out the trash? Did you do your homework? And there's that checking up, but how was school? The one-word answer, good. And you got the one-word answer because you asked a one-word question. But what's the best thing that happened to you today? What was the most frustrating thing that happened to you today? And going deeper than that, there's a teacher maybe who's a thorn in one of your kids' flesh. How's it going with so-and-so? What are you learning from that? What's God saying to you, And you can go deeper with questions. But I think you're right that we haven't quite learned the art of asking good questions. And by the way, your life is going to be, as a parent, is going to be so much more fulfilling when you raise conversationalists. Because when they're adults, they'll still give you one-word answers if you haven't figured out how to communicate with them.
Oh, that's so good.
But if you have learned how to really talk and be vulnerable and have deep conversations and thoughtful conversations, that's a gift that keeps giving for the rest of your life.
I love that. We have tried to do that, especially with Jankler and Jack. They love to talk. They love deep subjects, sometimes too deep for me.
I understand.
They talk on another level sometimes. Thankfully, their mother can communicate with them when it gets to that level. But it's fun. Even, we just got back from vacation, Jack's senior trip. There was just amazing conversation while we were gone.
Mm-hmm.
Like we got on the subject of abortion and other things, and just hearing how their mind processes and works. And I just let them talk, and I remember one thing that Jack said, and I was just like, hey, buddy, you might not want to take just a hard stance on that particular topic. Like, because you never know, what's going to come back to you. And it was good. It was healthy.
Absolutely. And we learn from our kids, for sure.
Yes, we do. Sometimes things we don't want to learn, but we learn for sure.
Yes.
What would you tell the parent? Let me rephrase that. What would you tell, anyone that is maybe entering into this season of raising kids that did not have the best example of parenting to pull from?
Right. My dad was a great dad. And I asked my dad about this. Dad, how is it that you were such a great dad? And he said, son, I just did for you what I always wished a dad would have done for me.
Oh, wow.
And so when you're acutely aware of the omissions and the misses, the things you didn't get, let that become fuel for your fire. And you don't have to, I think there's a reason, and it's reasonable that we would grieve certain things we didn't get. And I understand that. But at some point, that has to be motivation. And I've heard some parents explain their bad behavior in, I didn't have a good example. But last time I checked, you can interpret that one of two ways. My dad mentored me in what not to do, and that was very important, and that was valuable. I learned what to do, by that kind of parenting.
Absolutely.
So you can actually turn it around, the omissions, and say, didn't happen for me, but it's going to happen for my kids.
That's so good. You mentioned putting rivals in our kids' life. Anything that competes with God, anything that takes the place of. Go there for a moment.
Right. We discussed education and recreation, and we discussed, I know there was something else that I unpacked in that. Sports. Yeah, sports, unpack sports. And I was very clear in saying I'm not preaching against these things, but I'm preaching for something. And I see parents putting these rivals in their kids' lives. Because all of our kids are, going through education processes, probably some extracurricular processes and recreation. We have recreation with our families. It's not inherently bad. So how does this become an idol? In Isaiah 44, the Bible talks about a man who cuts down a tree, and he turns some of it into firewood, and he warms himself, and he cooks over the fire, makes meat. And then with the other half of the wood, the Bible says he carves an idol, and he bows down to it, and he says, save me. And this is the folly of idolatry, that you're looking for something that only God can provide from something that can't provide it to you. And so when we start to get our sense of worth and giving our kids are getting their sense of worth from what their batting average is, and we start relating to kids and only holding them accountable for what kind of grades they're getting, but we're not talking to them about their God connection. We're not asking them if they prayed today, but we're asking them if they did their homework. And the only follow-up is on, did you go to batting practice? Did you do your homework? And did you pack for, vacation? But we're not following up on faith and God connection. I think we're turning, and this is where we get idols, when you turn good into God.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, that's where we cross that line. And it's easy to cross that line, especially when our kids are gifted in a particular way, in a particular area. We love to see them excel.
Can you just share that story real quick, that Blake, that changed your perspective?
Yeah.
It changed how you parented.
Yes.
That was so good.
When Blake was a little guy, from very young, he was just a man among boys with his peers in sports. And so I just love to see him compete.
Absolutely. We live our lives many times through our kids.
And it's fun.
Yeah.
So I, was putting him in all these situations where he could compete. And man, it was just a blast. Well, one night, and again, he's just a boy, 7 or 8 years old. And I had a tradition where I would lay next to my children at nighttime. We'd talk about the Lord and pray. And we were talking about how the Lord is the most important thing in our lives. I didn't plan on asking the question, but I just came out with the question, Blake, do you love God more than sports? And he got really quiet. And then he said, I don't know, Dad. And I wasn't expecting to hear that. But I remember it got quiet after he made that statement. And in the darkness, I knew that I had put that rival in his life. He didn't know if he loved God more than sports, because that was the flame I fanned. And so we had a really big conversation that night.
Oh, that'll make you look square in the mirror.
Well, absolutely. Yeah. And I knew where that had all come from. And believe me, I felt danger in that moment. Like, where do we go from here? But in our conversation, Blake offered to back down and out of things. Not entirely, but backed way out. In fact, his life was never the same. His relationship with sports was never the same from that point forward. And my parenting wasn't the same from that point forward, because we got way too close to the edge. And I think I removed those barriers, invited him to the edge.
Wow.
So it was a moment.
There's no greater joy than to know our children walk in truth.
Isn't that the truth? I believe that with all of my heart. And what would comfort you or me? What amount of success would comfort us if our kids weren't living for the Lord? And you and I both have dear friends whose kids are not home in the faith at this point in time. And unquestionably, it is the deepest grief of their lives. And even the celebratory moments when they're together for Thanksgiving or a birthday party, it still hurts. Yeah. And so, and I'll just say this right here and right now, that if you do happen to have a prodigal, we do know that the prodigal son in Jesus' parable made bad decisions with a good inheritance. It's not all a reflection of parenting. Children, young people still make choices. But we're believing that the incorruptible seed of God's word is still preaching.
Yeah. I was thinking about that text. You mentioned that in your message, and they will not depart from it. The Lord just spoke to me. Maybe it was just for me, but just because that they're not home right now doesn't mean that your training is not still with them.
So true.
It has not departed from them.
So true. And don't forget what the proverb says, when they are old.
Yes.
So there could be quite a runway with that. And while we're on the subject, let's go ahead and just understand that this is a proverb, not a promise. So the way we raise our kids doesn't hijack their will. You can't parent so good that your kids don't have a choice. They will always have a choice. But it is generally true that if you raise your kids right, they're going to find their way when they're older back to what was right.
Thank you, Pastor Soto. What a beautiful weekend. Our church is better as a result of the one principle on Sunday. Thank you for sharing with Woodlawn Talks. I want to parent better. I want to lead better.
Me too.
I want to live a legacy. Thank you for joining us today on Woodlawn Talks. I pray this has been an encouragement to you, a strength to you. You've got this. You can do this. Be better today than you were yesterday. Admit where you have made mistakes. Admit where you have fallen short. Be honest. Be transparent with your kids, your grandkids, grandparents. Help us with this. You can help lead the next generation as well. May this be your best day.